one that we've done before. And Sean, could you read the statement at the top?
Readers use sticky notes to prepare for writing their responses to reading.
Yes. Remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be quite honest with you, I will take 98% of the blame as to why I'm not seeing this happen very much. I don't know if it's because I haven't made these accessible to you in a handy-dandy way, because I've had them sit up in the front of the room and you would have to get up and come and get a sticky note. Or maybe I just haven't been emphasizing it enough. But have you noticed when we do interactive read aloud, I often have Post-it notes? Have you ever noticed?
Yeah.
Am I so slick that you don't notice? No, you notice my sticky notes, right? Okay, so while I've been reading your letters to me about the books that you're reading, some of you are doing a fantastic job of being very specific, talking about the characters in your book, or talking about the time period, or talking about the setting. But some of you are being kind of vague and generic. You know what I mean by vague and generic? Like saying stuff and things are happening, nothing real specific. So I want to revisit this again, because this would be a tool that would help you be real specific in your letters to me, and also when we sit and talk one-on-one having a reading conference. So we're going to try our best to start using these sticky notes a little more often. So as you're reading, what's one thing you can do, Brenna? What's this top one say?
Stop one time or two times to make some quick notes about what you're thinking.
Yeah, so while you're reading, if something kind of pops out as, ooh, I like that line, or ooh, wow, I didn't expect that to happen, stop and jot it down on a Post-it note, or even just slap a Post-it note on that page, because then later you'll be like, oh yeah, now I remember why I put this note here. What's another thing, Isabel? Read this second one.
Place the sticky notes on the pages in your book that have prompted you to have these thoughts.
Right, so whatever page you have a thought, maybe you get a prediction, or maybe you're making a connection to something that happened in your own life. Or maybe you see a connection or a question answered that you had earlier when you started reading the book. You want to put that Post-it note there so you remember. Landon, what's the third thing?
When you're ready to write, you can use these notes to help you remember the parts you want to write about.
Right, like take a look at this book. Remember how I wrote a letter to you about Tuck Everlasting? Okay, and I'm going to talk about that letter in just a minute, but I had specific details about some characters and who I liked and who they reminded me of. And it's because when I slapped these Post-it notes in here, when I went to write my letter to you, I could go straight to my Post-it notes, and I could actually pull out details that Natalie Babbitt had in her book. And that's what I'm hoping you'll start doing as well. What's this say? The fourth one, Trevor.
You can use the notes when we are conferencing about your reading.
That's right. So when you and I are sitting one-on-one talking, not that you should be nervous, because I'm just me, right? I'm not like some big celebrity or anything. But when we're talking, you might kind of go blank for a minute and be like, well, it's a good book. I'm going to want to know more than that, right? Or if you say, well, it's kind of difficult, I'm not really understanding it, I'm going to ask you why, right? If you have parts marked in your book, you can go straight to those parts and point out the parts that are confusing to you, or the parts that you think are really interesting. So this is going to be handy, not just for letter writing, but also when we're conferencing about your reading as well. So what did I caution you about, though? And this hasn't happened. I have not seen this happen yet. In fact, we're having the exact opposite problem. Okay? What's the caution say, Jillian?
Not used to writing.
Right, because why?
Stopping too often to write notes will interrupt your reading process.
So if you're stopping like every other paragraph to slap something on a sticky note, put it in your book, that's going to interrupt the whole reading process. All that start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Okay? So you don't want to go overboard and have too many sticky notes. But I would say maybe like every, 4 or 5 pages, you should have one, right? Okay. So remember the letter I wrote to you about Tuck Everlasting in your reader's notebook? And I talked about Angus Tuck being one of my favorite characters because he reminded me of my grandpa. And I even quoted him. That's because it's not that I have a memory that's fantastic and I remember exactly what he said, but I had a Post-it note that said Tuck's sad explanation. And so I just went straight to that page and I explained his thoughts about this water that made them live forever. Okay. I also talked to you in the letter about when they discovered the water that made them live forever. And didn't I read this part to you?
Yeah.
Well, Braden, I don't think you were here. But remember how I read how they discovered that they could live forever, how they knew that? Yeah, and again, I mean, I've read this book a bunch of times, so I probably could remember a little bit of it. But this made it so I could tell you step by step how they remembered they could live forever. If I wanted to write about different characters and traits that would describe them, I've got a page marked for Winnie and words that describe her. I have a page marked for the stranger and words that would describe him. I've even got one here. Oh, look here. Miles' sad story. Okay, words that describe him. So by marking your book, that's going to help you give more details in your letters and also when we're conferencing one-on-one. Let's say, for example, remember this book, The Long, Long Letter? Or did we pause and talk about words that would describe the ant that was waiting for the letter? Yeah. Okay, do you know why we paused? You got it. I had a sticky note, words that would describe, what's my sloppy handwriting say? Aunt Hedda. And we paused there and we talked about traits of Aunt Hedda. So by using these sticky notes, it's going to help you remember some specific details to put in your letter, and it's also going to help you remember some specific details for when we conference. Okay, so let's do this. Today when you're reading, I want you to try this, where you're going to put some sticky notes in your book. Some of you are doing it already, but some of you don't have a single sticky note in your book, and you should, right? Okay, so we're going to take these, and I'm going to have you share half of them with a friend, and then I want you to keep them in your bin. Because then if you've got them right there at your desk, it'll be easy just to grab them and write something down. Anybody have any questions? No? When we're done with our silent reading time, we're going to get back together back here. You'll bring your book with you, and hopefully you've got a couple of sticky notes. And we'll share what kinds of things you marked with your sticky notes in your book. Okay? All right. Let me give you a pad of Post-it notes to share with a friend. I'll start with you, Abby. So just about halfway through, tear it apart, give it to somebody. And then head to your seat. You want to grab your bin on your way to your seat.